Once upon a time, there was this girl who always had to work a lot because her stepmother and her stepsister made her. On a particularly bad day, she pricked her finger with a spindle, and blood was all over her hands, and they got slippery, and the spindle fell into the well. The mean stepmother said that she should basically jump in after it to retrieve it if she didn't have the money to pay for a new one. So in her desperation, she did. She jumped down. And she passed out on the way down. When she woke up in a strange land. And she started walking and came to a house. The house belonged to an old woman. It turned out to be Frau Holle. And Frau Holle, after listening to the plight of the girl, offered to employ her as her maid in order for her to make more money and maybe buy a new spindle. The girl was grateful and said yes, and did everything that Frau Holle asked of her and more. So she scrubbed the floor, she cleaned the windows, and she shook the feather pillows really hell. After a time, she grew homesick. And she asked to be released from Frau Holle's service. So Frau Holle said, okay. She led her to a gate. And she said, step through here and reap your just rewards. So when the girl stepped through, she was showered in gold. And henceforth, she was called Gold Mary. Now, when she came home, she was, of course, received with open arms, rich as she was, because the stepmother wanted to know where all this pretty gold came from. So when she heard about Gold Mary's experiences, she told the stepsister to do the same thing right away. So down the well the stepsister went, woke up in a strange land, went to Frau Holle's door, and demanded to be employed as a maid. Was granted her wish. And so she did what she was supposed to do. She scrubbed the floor, she cleaned the window, she shook the feather pillows. But oh, that was a lot of work. And the next day she had to do it again. And it was even more work. And she just didn't want to do it, really. And her performance dropped, and she did a poor job. And at some point, she didn't even really get up out of bed anymore. So that's when Frau Holle decided it's time for her to collect her reward. And so she led her to the gateway and said, step right through and collect your reward. And so the girl went through the doorway and was covered in pitch, in tar, and the sticky black stuff that would never ever come out of her clothing again, of her hair, of her skin. And she would forever live with that shame of being called Pitch Mary. For generations, German parents have been telling this fairy tale to their children so that they would clean up their rooms without complaining. To me, it actually encapsulates quite a lot of what I have found to be true about happiness and engagement in the workplace. Think about it. It's not true that success comes first, and only if we're successful, then we're happy and we're engaged, like Pitch Mary thought. It's the opposite. It's those people that are engaged, that are happy with what they're doing, that go above and beyond because they really believe in what they're doing. Those are the people that become successful, like Gold Mary. Money is a strong motivational factor only up until a certain saturation point. And above that, the law of diminishing returns kicks in. And additional money won't motivate you at all anymore. What I have found is important instead, and of course this differs by every individual, but sort of a common denominator is that the person feels like the work that they're doing is making an impact, it's making a difference. And that they're given a certain degree of independence to do the job in the way that they think is the best way to do it. And don't just take my word for it. Amy Wrzynski from the Yale School of Management and a psychologist named Sean Aker, they have come to pretty much the same conclusion in their work. So, okay, the difference between fairy tales and real life, though, is that in fairy tales, the characters, the good ones, they get to live happily ever after, right? In reality, life always comes up with the next challenge for us to master, with the next transition for us to go through. So let's assume that you achieved gold Mary status in your current occupation. What do you do if it's taken away from you? How do you maintain this positive, can-do attitude of wanting to show up as the best you every day in life and in work if there's a transition forced on you that you're not in control of? And to make that a little more palpable, let's talk about a wave of change that has already appeared on the horizon and is rolling towards us right now. The fourth industrial revolution, Industry 4.0, meaning the increasing capacity of machines to perform in jobs that have heretofore only been performed by humans. So how big of a deal is that? Well, according to Pew Research, about 2/3 of American adults estimate that pretty much all the tasks that we do on a day-to-day basis at work will be taken over by artificial intelligence, by machines, within about 50 years. But then again, there's other studies that show 80% of workers saying, other jobs maybe, my job, it's too special, it's too complicated, machines can't do that. Now and in 50 years, only a human can do that. So obviously there's a certain disconnect that doesn't quite fit together. Okay? So that's the layman's opinion. What about experts in the field of artificial intelligence? On this graphic you see the answers AI experts have given to the question of when do you think machines will be able to outperform humans in these fields, in these job fields? And there's some answers in there that might feel quite intuitive. So for example, we're looking at maybe 5 to 6 years until machines can fold laundry better. Awesome. Scripted interactions with humans on the phone as a telephone banking clerk, for example, 7 years. Artificial truck drivers are slated to outperform their human counterparts in about 12 years. But the important thing is that we're not only talking about low-skilled jobs here. We're also talking about mid-level management. We're talking about lawyers. We're talking about surgeons. We're talking even about best-selling book authors. Who's waiting with me anxiously for the next Game of Thrones novel? Yeah? Well, one fellow fan didn't want to wait anymore, and he fed all the existing books to a special kind of artificial intelligence that's called a recurrent neural network, and it came back with its best guess on what the first chapters of the next book might look like. And it's a fascinating read. You can read it up on GitHub. It's not a very good read as of yet. It's not hardly even intelligible, but it just shows you that artificial intelligence can make great headway. It can move into spheres of influence, into jobs that we wouldn't have naturally thought that there would be any place for it. And so while this dynamic is going on, experts aren't quite sure whether overall in the balance this revolution will create more jobs than it destroys or destroy more jobs than it creates. But wherever this scale ends up, the jobs that will be created will be significantly different from the jobs that will have been destroyed. For example, who even heard of search engine optimization as a job 10 to 15 years ago? Who would have thought it would be a good idea to get into that? And so we're not going to know what comes next either. Now, to their credit, 87% of American workers state that they recognize that they will have to go through training throughout their career in order to keep up with changes in the workplace. But just keeping up with the changes in Excel 2028 is not going to be enough. There is a strong body of evidence that shows us that we as humans tend to severely underestimate the capacity of the world for change and our own capacity for change. And that's especially true when that change relates to us ourselves. And you can even see that in that graphic we were talking about. What job field do you think AI research was saying, that's a special job field, only humans can do this for, let's say, the next 80 to 200 years? AI researchers. So, obviously, Industry 4.0 asks a lot of questions that we have to find an answer to as a society, as a whole. But for the rest of this talk, let's focus on how an individual can cope with a transition that is so massive and that they are not in charge of. And to a lot of people who are young professionals today or students today, this might actually happen several times throughout their careers. So with me being a coach, it might not come as an utter shock to you that this looks, sounds, and feels like a coaching challenge to me. And just a very brief background, the type of coaching that I do is based on the teachings and the research of Milton Erickson, who was a psychiatrist and so much more, and one of his students, Marilyn Atkinson, who founded the Ericksonian School of Coaching and who I've had the great pleasure and honor of meeting a couple of weeks ago. One of the basic principles of this type of coaching is that change is inevitable. That means it's neither good nor bad, it's a fact. And in order to cope with change, it is very helpful to embrace it as such, as a fact, and to accept it. Now, obviously, that's easily said and not as easily done. And in order to explain how I propose to do it, I would propose a metaphor. And that metaphor that I would propose for a huge transition of this kind and many other kinds of transition is surfing. I've recently had my first surf lesson, and I have a solid 80 minutes of practical experience. So who better than me to introduce you to the world of surfing? So obviously, you can't catch any great waves from the beach on the sand. So what you have to do is you get on your belly and you paddle out and you swim. And you might drink a lot of ocean water on the way, and it doesn't look elegant and it doesn't look pretty, but that's kind of the price of admission if you're gonna get to where the action is. And once you're out there, you can't just hit a button and have the perfect wave come and take you away. Instead, you look around and you analyze the waves. And you just see, you try to anticipate where that next wave might be coming from. And if you have anticipated that, you get out ahead of it and you feel it swelling under you and transferring its energy to you, and that's the moment where you pop up from your tummy up on your feet, and that's when you take control and you stand upright and you can sort of choose the direction to a certain degree. And while you do that, what I've learned, what's very important, so there we're waiting, we're discovering our wave, and now we popped up. And while we're doing that, it's very important to not look at what you're doing. You don't look at your feet, you don't look at the water, you don't look at your board, you look at where you're going. You look at the beach. Well, and you look around and hope that you don't run over anybody, so you also look at the other people. But so you caught your wave and you're looking at the beach and you're trusting your body to help get you there. You're having fun, you're looking good, and eventually though, every wave will lose its energy and the energy will dissipate. And you know, that's what happens when you don't pay attention. Eventually you end up back at the beach. And that's when the game starts over again. So you swim out there, and that's a lot like acquiring the capabilities you need in order to do what it is you set out to do in your work life. When you're out there looking for the wave, looking for something to propel you, to give you that energy, that's your values. For me personally, right now, it's authenticity, courage. Those are values that are very important to me right now. And when you pop up and you take control, you show who you are. You show what you stand for, both in a personal and a professional context. And when you look at the beach and you look for the other people, you look at what impact you are having on other people in your life, on your colleagues, on your friends, and on the world in general. And you look at where it is that you want to end up. Basically what you're doing is you're discovering your vision. And discovering your vision is not, I want to work for the EU or I want to work as a psychologist. Discovering your vision goes deeper. It's about the impact, the change that you want to create in the world. And when you discover your vision, everything else can fall into place. When you discover your vision, you know what role you play in that bigger picture. When you discover your vision, you know what values you want to pursue in order to make that a reality. And you know what capabilities you need in order to get there. In life, as in surfing, there are many things that you're not in control of. A robot, a machine, might actually take your job from you one day. A job that you've worked very hard for. A job that you were very good at. But once you have discovered your vision, you know what is really important to you. And you will have discovered that there are many ways in order to achieve that vision, never just one. You are not defined by the things that you have been doing. You can define your own identity with the kind of impact that you choose to have in the future. And with that mindset, you will develop the ownership and the flexibility to master any transition. And whether you do it with a coach or you do it by yourself, if you practice that mindset and you master it, then eventually you will be surfing with robots. Thank you.